Do you feel like a part of you has already died, even while you are still alive? Do you go through emotional transformations that nobody around you fully understands? Do you carry strange fears, strange dreams, strange intuitions? Do people tell you that you are too deep, too intense, or impossible to truly know? Have you experienced sudden losses, betrayals, endings, separations, or emotional darkness that changed you permanently? Do you feel detached from the material world at times, yet strangely obsessed with understanding the hidden side of life? Death, karma, secrets, occult, knowledge, the unseen, the soul? Then Ketu might be sitting in your eighth house, and this placement is not light, because the eighth house itself is one of the deepest and most mysterious places in astrology. It rules death and rebirth, trauma and healing, hidden fears, sudden events, shared resources, intimacy, psychological transformation, the occult, hidden karma, the unconscious mind. This is the house where the ego does not survive comfortably. And Ketu is the planet of detachment, past life residue, spiritual exhaustion, isolation, loss, and liberation. So when Ketu enters the eighth house, the soul often comes into this life already carrying ancient emotional memories. It is as if the person already has already seen too much pain, too much betrayal, too much impermanence. That is why many people with Ketu in the eighth house feel emotionally older than their age. Even as children, they may feel different from others, more observant, more withdrawn, more psychologically aware. Sometimes they grow up sensing hidden tension in people without anyone saying a word, because Ketu sees what is invisible. This placement often creates people who are highly intuitive, not in a dramatic fantasy way, but in a silent, uncomfortable way. You may feel energies before events happen. You may sense lies immediately. You may enter a room and instantly feel emotional heaviness. You may have vivid dreams, symbolic experiences, strange synchronicities, or moments where your intuition becomes frighteningly accurate. And yet, despite all this depth, you may also feel emotionally disconnected from life itself. That is one of the painful paradoxes of Ketu. It creates spiritual awareness, but emotional distance. Many Ketu in the eighth house people struggle with intimacy, not because they do not crave deep connection, but because deep down they fear vulnerability. The soul remains pain associated with trust, so the person may unconsciously hide parts of themselves. They may isolate during emotional pain. They may disappear emotionally even while physically present. Others may never fully understand what is happening inside you, because this placement creates private suffering, silent suffering. You may go through transformations that nobody notices until you emerge as an entirely different person, and that transformation theme repeats throughout life. The eighth house destroys what you once were so something deeper can emerge. With Ketu here, the changes often feel karmic and unavoidable. Sudden endings, sudden emotional detachment, unexpected losses, relationships collapsing overnight, periods where life strips away your emotional certainty, not necessarily to punish you, but to detach you from illusions. Ketu in the eighth house rarely allows superficial living. You may try to live normally for a while, focus only on money, comfort, routine, social validation. But eventually, life pulls you back toward deeper questions. What is the meaning of all this? What remains after loss? Who am I underneath my identity? What is death? What is karma? Because your soul is not satisfied with surface level existence. This placement often creates attraction toward spirituality, tantra, mysticism, astrology, psychology, healing, occult sciences, meditation, hidden knowledge, or esoteric subjects. not always as a hobby, sometimes as survival, because ordinary explanations fail to explain the emotional intensity you experience internally. Many people with Ketu in the 8th house have gone through emotional shocking experiences that forced spiritual awakening. You may have faced betrayal that shattered trust forever, a sudden death around you, a traumatic separation, an emotionally dark period, a near death experience, psychological collapse, abandonment, humiliation, isolation, and after such experiences, you were never the same again. That is the signature of the 8th house. Transformation through destruction. But Ketu makes the process internalized. So instead of dramatic external reactions, you may become quieter after pain, detached, numb, emotionally distant. People may think you have moved on when in reality something inside you simply shut down. Ketu has a way of cutting emotional cords suddenly. And because of this, relationships become deeply karmic with displacement. You may attract intense emotional bonds that feel faded, connections that transform you psychologically, relationships involving obsession, secrecy, emotional extremes, spiritual attachment, or painful detachment. Sometimes the person experiences deep intimacy followed by sudden emotional emptiness because Ketu eventually creates disillusionment with whatever the soul becomes too attached to. And yes, this placement can make a person fascinated by death itself, not always physically, but philosophically. You may think about impermanence often. You may feel drawn toward graveyards, ancient history, mysteries, hidden truths, abandoned places, spiritual symbolism, or questions about the afterlife. Others may find this strange. But to you, these subjects feel emotionally real because your soul naturally moves toward what society avoids. One of the hidden gifts of Ketu in the 8th house is psychological X ray vision. You can often see through masks quickly. You notice hidden motives, hidden pain, hidden manipulation, hidden insecurity. Sometimes this becomes exhausting because you cannot easily enjoy shallow interactions. Your soul keeps searching for depth, but this same ability can make you an extraordinary healer, counselor, astrologer, spiritual guide, researcher, psychologist, investigator, or transformative presence in other people's lives. People may confess things to you unexpectedly. They may feel emotionally exposed around you, not because you force it, but because your energy naturally penetrates surfaces. Yet, despite understanding others deeply, you may struggle to understand your own emotional emptiness because Ketu creates spiritual detachment even from personal desires. There may be periods where you lose interest in everything: relationships, goals, pleasure, socializing. You may withdraw from the world emotionally. And honestly, many Ketu in the 8th house individuals spend years fighting loneliness that cannot easily be explained. Not ordinary loneliness, soul loneliness, the feeling that nobody fully reaches the deepest part of you. And sometimes even you cannot reach it yourself. Financially, this placement can create unusual patterns involving inheritance, joint resources, taxes, spouse finances, hidden assets, or sudden gains and losses. Life may feel unpredictable. The person often learns not to depend too heavily on external stability because the 8th house constantly reminds them that everything can change suddenly. But spiritually, this placement is powerful, extremely powerful, because Ketu in the 8th house weakens attachment to the illusion of permanence. Over time, the soul begins understanding truths that cannot be taught intellectually, that control is temporary, that ego is fragile, that life changes without warning, that death exists beside life every moment, that transformation is unavoidable, and strangely, once this realization matures, fear slowly decreases. This is one of the highest expression of displacement. The person becomes emotionally fearless, not because life was kind to them, but because life already took them into darkness and they survived. Many people with displacement develop tremendous resilience after suffering. You may look calm outside while internally carrying storms that would break others, and because of that, you eventually stop fearing emotional destruction the same way others do. You already know what it feels like to lose parts of yourself. Displacement can also create periods of isolation from society, times where you withdraw deeply, disappear emotionally, detach from people, question everything. These phases are often necessary for your soul's evolution because Ketu in the 8th house transforms through solitude, not through noise. And eventually, after enough transformations, something remarkable begins happening. You stop trying to control life so desperately. You stop clinging so tightly to identities, relationships, or outcomes. You begin understanding impermanence instead of resisting it. And that is where the spiritual depth of displacement reveals itself. Because at the highest level, Ketu in the 8th house creates someone who can walk through darkness without losing awareness, someone who can sit with pain without escaping it, someone who understands human suffering deeply, someone who becomes emotionally wise not from books, but from surviving inner death repeatedly. And yes, there is pain in this placement, a lot of pain, but there is also profound spiritual evolution hidden inside it, because this is not the placement of superficial souls. This is the placement of souls who came into this life carrying unfinished karmic intensity, souls meant to transform, souls meant to awaken, souls meant to discover what remains after the ego breaks apart. And perhaps that is why your life sometimes feels heavier than others, because your soul did not come here merely to experience comfort, it came here to understand truth, even when truth hurts, even when it strips away illusions, even when it leaves you standing alone in emotional darkness, especially then. Because Ketu in the 8th house does not create ordinary people, it creates survivors of inner worlds, people who lose themselves, find themselves, lose themselves again, and slowly realize that transformation itself was always the path.